The boardroom of Halden Robotics had never been this quiet. 32 floors above the city where billion-dollar decisions were made without a flinch, every executive at that long glass table had stopped breathing. Because Serena Halden, the woman who had restructured 3 failing divisions in 1 quarter, who had walked out of a federal hearing without blinking, was standing at the head of the room holding a folder that shook slightly in her hands. At the other end of the table stood Dorian Price, black, 36, still wearing his maintenance uniform, a small grease stain near the left cuff he hadn't had time to change. He didn't belong in this room. Everyone knew it, including him. What no one in that room knew except Serena was that she had already asked this man to marry her. Twice. Once in a server corridor after he saved the company's most critical system in under 8 minutes. Once outside an elementary school in the rain with no audience and no strategy. Both times, he said no. Now she was placing a sealed letter on the table, a letter written by his dead wife and whispering, "You need to know the truth." What was in that letter? If you love stories about quiet strength, hidden truths, and love that earns itself, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you never miss one. Now let's go back to where this all began. Serena Halden did not believe in sentiment. She believed in leverage, in timing, in the kind of clarity that came only after you had stripped every decision down to its numbers. She had inherited Halden Robotics at 29, when her father Lionel Halden suffered the first of 3 strokes that would eventually end his life. At the time, the company was bleeding overextended on contracts, underperforming on delivery, and circled by investors who smelled weakness. Within 18 months, Serena had cut the dead weight, renegotiated 4 major partnerships, and positioned Halden Robotics as the leading provider of automated medical systems in the country. She was 34 now. The company was worth $4 billion, and she had not taken a single vacation day in 3 years. Her office on the 32nd floor had floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk that cost more than most people's cars, and no photographs. Not of family, not of friends, not of anyone. When a journalist once asked her what she kept on her desk for inspiration, Serena had looked at him as though the question confused her. "The next quarter's projections," she said. He laughed. She had not been joking. The people who worked at Halden Robotics respected her in the way that people respected cold weather completely and from a safe distance. Her executive team anticipated her moods by the speed of her walk. If Serena moved at her normal pace down the hallway, the day was manageable. If she moved faster, someone was about to have a very bad afternoon. No one in 5 years of her leadership had ever seen her be wrong and admit it. No one had ever seen her ask for help. Dorian Price arrived at Halden Robotics every morning at 6:45. He parked his 2014 Civic in the far corner of the employee lot, walked in through the side entrance near loading bay 3, and clocked in without talking to anyone except Marcus, the security guard, who always had the worst coffee on the floor and always offered it anyway. Dorian always took the cup. He always drank it. He worked maintenance on the building's technical infrastructure, the power routing systems, the climate controls in the server rooms, the mechanical interfaces that kept the robotics labs from overheating. It was invisible work, the kind that only got noticed when something went wrong. He was good at it. Better than good. He could hear a system struggling the way some people hear a note go flat instinctively before the instrument finishes the sound. His colleagues knew this. When something in the building behaved strangely, they called Dorian before they filed a report. What his colleagues did not know, what almost no one at Halden Robotics knew, was who Dorian Price had been before this job. He had a degree in systems engineering from Carnegie Mellon. He had spent 6 years building fail-safe architecture for medical automation platforms, working with 3 different tech firms whose names would have impressed every person in that building. He had been, by most accounts, one of the sharpest systems engineers of his generation. And then 4 years ago, he had walked away from all of it. His daughter Ellis was 3 years old when her mother died. Ariel Price had been a brilliant algorithmic designer, quiet and methodical, and deeply loved. She died in a car accident on a Tuesday morning in November on a road she drove every day in weather that was cold but not dangerous. The official report said, "Black ice." Dorian had read it 17 times. After the funeral, after the casseroles stopped arriving and the condolence cards stopped coming, Dorian sat in their apartment and looked at his daughter sleeping in her crib and made a decision so simple it frightened him. Ellis would not grow up wondering where her father was. Not for a conference call, not for a product launch, not for anything. He took the maintenance job because the hours were fixed. 6:45 in, 2:40 out. Every day. No exceptions. No late meetings. No emergency travel. He had one rule, and it was unbreakable. He was at the school gate when Ellis's class let out every single afternoon without fail. Ellis was 7 now. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and a laugh that could fill a room without trying. She liked drawing horses, hated math homework, and had recently decided that her favorite food was whatever Dorian was cooking that evening. A compliment so consistent he had started to wonder if she was managing him. She probably was. Dorian's world was small. 2 rooms, a shared kitchen, a parking lot and a school gate, and the same route home every evening. He had built that smallness carefully, the way you build anything you need to trust, slowly, deliberately, with full attention to every joint and corner. He was not lonely, he was certain of that. He was also not prepared for Serena Halden. The alert came in at 11:14 on a Wednesday morning. Halden Robotics' medical coordination system, the platform that managed surgical robot scheduling across 6 partner hospitals, had locked itself into a recursive error loop. Every attempt to reset it pushed the failure deeper. The system was not crashing. It was freezing layer by layer like ice forming over moving water. And the engineering team on the 14th floor had been staring at it for 2 hours without making progress. By 1 o'clock, the situation had reached Serena's desk. She came down to the technical floor herself, which was unusual enough that people stopped talking when she walked in. She stood at the back of the room and listened to her senior engineers explain in increasingly careful language that they did not know what was causing the lock, and that the safest option might be to take the entire network offline and rebuild the authentication layer from scratch. The cost of that rebuild, $11 million and 3 weeks of downtime. The cost of the downtime, 6 hospitals operating without automated surgical coordination, 17 scheduled procedures delayed, and a contract penalty clause that would trigger if the system was offline for more than 48 hours. Serena said nothing. She looked at the error cascade on the main monitor, a waterfall of red-flagged lines that her engineers had been treating as a software failure, and she felt something she rarely felt in this building. She felt stuck. Dorian had been replacing a faulty junction panel in the corridor outside the technical floor when the door opened and the noise of the room spilled out. He glanced in not because it was his business, but because the specific frequency of stressed voices was something his brain processed automatically, the same way it processed the sound of a system under pressure. He saw the monitor. He stopped. He looked at the error log for 11 seconds. He counted later because he found it strange that 11 seconds was all it took. The problem was not in the software. The error cascade was being generated by a legacy safety subroutine, an old authentication layer that had been dormant in the system for years, never removed during the platform upgrades. It had been triggered by a spoofed verification signal, probably from a third-party scheduling interface that had updated its handshake protocol without notifying Halden's team. The dormant subroutine interpreted the new signal as a breach attempt and began locking access ports in sequence exactly as it had been designed to do. It was not a failure. It was the system working perfectly, just working perfectly according to rules that no longer applied. Dorian set down his toolkit and walked into the room. Nobody stopped him. He was wearing his uniform, carrying a work order on a clipboard, and moving with the calm certainty of someone who belonged wherever he decided to stand. He went directly to the secondary terminal at the left side of the room, sat down, and began typing. "Hey!" one of the junior engineers started. "Give me 4 minutes," Dorian said without looking up. He isolated the dormant subroutine, suspended its authentication demands, rerouted the verification handshake through a temporary bypass, and re-established the primary access loop. Then he ran a manual confirmation sequence to make sure the hospital's connections were clean before anything came back online. 6 minutes and 40 seconds. The waterfall of red on the main monitor went still. Then, one by one, the access confirmations came back green. The room was completely silent. Dorian stood up, picked up his clipboard, and turned to leave. "Wait!" Serena's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It was the kind of voice that made rooms pay attention without being asked. Dorian turned around. She was looking at him the way she looked at things she did not yet understand, but intended to. It was not a comfortable look to be on the receiving end of. "Where did you learn to read that system?" she asked. Dorian held her gaze for a moment. Then he said, "I fix broken things. That's the job." He walked out. Behind him, Serena Halden stood in the middle of her technical floor surrounded by her senior engineers and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She had just been answered by someone who was not trying to impress her. Serena had his file on her desk within the hour. She read it twice. Then she sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment, which was something she never did. Dorian Marcus Price, age 36, systems engineering degree, Carnegie Mellon, graduated top of his class. 6 years of postgraduate work across 3 firms, all of them serious, all of them doing exactly the kind of infrastructure architecture that Halden Robotics spent millions trying to recruit for. His last position had been senior systems lead at a medical automation startup that had since been acquired by one of Halden's competitors. And then, nothing. 4 years of nothing, followed by a maintenance application submitted to Halden Robotics with no cover letter and no reference to his previous career. Serena pulled up his original application. The work history section listed only the maintenance role. His engineering background was completely absent. He had not lied. The application hadn't asked for full career history, but he had made himself invisible so deliberately that it looked intentional. It was intentional. She called him to her office the following morning. Dorian arrived exactly on time, which she noted. He sat across from her desk without being invited, to which she also noted. He did not look around the room or at the view or at anything except her, which was either confidence or indifference, and she could not yet tell which. She offered him the position directly, special technical advisor reporting to her. Compensation package that would triple his current salary. Flexible scheduling. Access to every active project in the company. Dorian listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "No, thank you." Serena blinked. "I haven't told you the full number yet." "The number doesn't change the answer." She studied him. "You have a systems engineering background that half my senior team would trade their bonuses for. You solved in 6 minutes what my people couldn't solve in 2 hours. I'm offering you a role that matches what you're actually capable of." "I understand what you're offering," Dorian said, "and I appreciate it. But I leave this building at 2:40 every afternoon. That's not flexible. And any role you just described requires someone who can stay." "Your daughter," Serena said. She had read the file thoroughly. Something shifted in his expression. Not defensiveness exactly, but a sharpening. "Yes. We can work around a school schedule." "People always say that," Dorian said, "until the first emergency. Then the schedule becomes negotiable, and then it becomes optional, and then it disappears." He stood up. "I'm good at my job, Ms. Halden. The job I have. I'd like to keep doing it." He left before she could respond. Serena did not handle the refusal well, which was to say she handled it in complete silence, and then worked until midnight reorganizing a project proposal she had already approved. She told herself she was frustrated because the company needed his skills. That was true. She told herself the conversation was a tactical setback, nothing more. That was less true. What unsettled her was not that he had said no. It was how he had said it. Without apology, without performance, without any of the careful language people usually used when turning her down. The softening phrases, the flattery, the door left open qualifications. He had simply meant it. She was not used to people simply meaning things. 3 days later, when a second system failure put a major hospital contract at risk and her engineering team once again reached the edge of their capacity, Serena made a decision that she would later recognize as the moment everything changed. She did not call Dorian to her office. She went to find him herself. And when she found him, she did not offer him a job. She asked him to marry her. She found him in the east corridor of sub-level 2, replacing a corroded relay panel behind a server rack. He had his sleeves rolled up and a flashlight clenched between his teeth, and he did not hear her coming until she was 3 feet away. He pulled the flashlight out and looked at her. "Ms. Halden." "We have a problem with the hospital network again," she said. "Different system, same risk level. My team has been on it since this morning." "I heard." He turned back to the panel. "I'm maintenance. That's above my clearance." "I know." She paused. The corridor was narrow and smelled like cooling fluid and old wiring. It was the least appropriate place she had ever had an important conversation, and she had chosen it deliberately because she knew he would not come to her. "I also know that you could fix it in under an hour." "Probably," he said, "but that's not my job. I want to change that." She stopped. Then, because Serena Halden had never learned to approach a difficult thing sideways, she said, "I want you to marry me." Dorian went very still. He set down the relay he was holding. He turned around slowly and looked at her with an expression she could not read. Not shock, not amusement, something more careful than either. "I'm sorry," he said. "The board is pushing to bring in an outside technical firm to manage our core systems. If that happens, we lose control of our own infrastructure. I need someone I trust in a position of real authority before the next board meeting, and right now our bylaws require that position to be held by someone with a direct stake in the company's leadership structure." She said it quickly because the logic was the only part of this she was confident in. "A formal partnership would give you standing. It would also give me—" "Stop." His voice was not angry. It was quieter than she expected. "You're describing a transaction. I'm describing a solution. You're describing using me," he said, "and using my daughter as a footnote to a board strategy." "That's not—" "Is Ellis part of this calculation?" he asked. "Because if she is, I need you to be honest about that." Serena said nothing, which was its own answer. Dorian picked up his relay and turned back to the panel. "No," he said, "not a transaction, not a strategy, not for any number you can put in front of me. We're done here." Serena did not give up, but she changed her approach. She stopped summoning him to meetings. She stopped sending emails with subject lines that read like memos. Instead, she began appearing in the places where Dorian actually spent his time. The sub-level corridors, the maintenance break room, the small cafeteria on the second floor where the coffee was terrible and the tables were wobbly, and no one from the executive floor ever came. She came 3 days in a row. She sat at the corner table with a cardboard cup of coffee she could barely drink, and she did not try to recruit him or persuade him or present him with a revised offer. She just sat. On the third day, Dorian sat down across from her without being asked. "You're making my coworkers nervous," he said. "I'm making myself nervous," she admitted. He almost smiled, not quite. "What do you actually want, Ms. Halden?" She thought about it honestly. "I don't know yet," she said. "I think that's the problem." It was the first completely true thing she had said to him, and he seemed to know it because some of the guardedness in his expression shifted. They talked for 20 minutes. Not about the company, not about the board. He told her about Ellis's recent obsession with drawing horses, despite never having seen one in person. She told him without planning that she had never learned to cook anything and had been eating the same 3 delivery orders in rotation for 2 years. He looked at her with something between disbelief and pity. She found surprisingly that she didn't mind. The dinner happened 10 days later. Serena had suggested a restaurant she liked, quiet, expensive, the kind of place where the lighting made everything feel significant. Dorian thanked her for the suggestion and redirected them to a diner 4 blocks from Ellis's school. Vinyl booths, laminated menus, a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since 2019. Ellis ordered a grilled cheese and chocolate milk and immediately began showing Serena a drawing she had done in class that day. It was a horse, technically, though it had 6 legs and what appeared to be a hat. "That's very detailed," Serena said carefully. "He's fancy." Ellis said with complete confidence. "Fancy horses have hats." Dorian caught Serena's eye across the table. She looked briefly lost, not in a bad way, in the way of someone who had just walked into a room they had never been in before and found it warmer than expected. She watched Dorian with Ellis throughout dinner. He remembered without being reminded that Ellis didn't like pickles. He noticed a small scrape on his daughter's left hand and asked about it with the casual precision of someone who had memorized every square inch of that child. When Ellis talked, he put his phone face down on the table and did not look at it once. Serena had been in hundreds of meetings with powerful people. She had watched men manage impressions her entire career. She knew the difference between a performance and a habit. This was a habit. It was so deeply a habit that Dorian did not even know she was watching. She drove home that night and sat in her car in the parking garage for a long time before going inside. She was beginning to understand why she kept coming back, and it had nothing to do with the board. The discovery happened by accident, the way the most important things usually do. Serena had been reviewing a storage archive of legacy contracts and patent filings dry work, the kind she normally delegated when she found a folder that had been mislabeled. The label read, Infrastructure Maintenance Records, 2014 to 2016. The contents were something else entirely. Inside were the original development files for Mercy Corps. Mercy Corps was the safety algorithm at the center of Halden Robotics' entire medical platform. It was the reason hospitals trusted their systems, the reason the company had survived its early years when the technology was still proving itself. Lionel Halden had described it publicly as the product of his engineering team's collective genius. It was mentioned in every investor presentation, every press release, every profile of the company ever written. Serena had grown up hearing her father talk about Mercy Corps the way other people talked about a founding myth. She read the original files for 2 hours. The lead architect was not her father's team. The algorithm had been designed, built, and stress-tested by a single external contractor, a young algorithmic engineer working on a freelance basis during the company's second year. Her name in every internal document was Ariel Price. Serena sat very still for a long time after she read that name. She pulled everything she could find over the following 3 days. Development logs, internal correspondence, payment records, the original contractor agreement. The picture that assembled itself was clear and ugly. Ariel Price had designed Mercy Corps under a contract that promised shared patent credit. When the algorithm proved to be more valuable than anyone had anticipated, Lionel Halden had quietly restructured the patent filing. Ariel's name was removed. The contractor agreement was buried. A revised internal document created 6 months after the original filing listed the algorithm as proprietary company development with no external attribution. Ariel had contested it. There were 3 letters in the archive, formal, precise, written by someone who knew exactly what had been done to her and exactly what it was worth. Lionel had responded through his legal team each time. The final letter in the file was dated 11 months before Ariel's death. She had stopped fighting. Serena found the last document in a sealed internal envelope that had never been entered into the digital system. It was a notarized statement signed by Lionel Halden, written during his final months, witnessed by the family attorney. In it, he acknowledged what he had done. He acknowledged that the founding patent credit for Mercy Corps belonged to Ariel Price, and he included a clause conditional specific, written in the careful language of a man trying to correct something without fully dismantling what he had built, stating that if the truth were ever formally disclosed, the founding equity stake that should have been Ariel's would transfer to her surviving spouse and child, to Dorian, to Ellis. Serena read the clause 4 times. Then she put everything back in the folder, locked her office, and went to the window. Outside, 32 floors below, the city moved the way it always did. Indifferent, continuous. She thought about what she was holding. Dorian believed his wife had simply died tragically, randomly, on an icy road. He did not know that in the years before her death, Ariel had been fighting a quiet legal battle against the company his wife's algorithm had built. He did not know that his daughter was the rightful heir to a founding stake in a $4 billion corporation. He did not know that the company he fixed wiring for every morning had been built in its most essential part, on something that belonged to his family. He did not know any of it. And Serena had known for 3 days and had said nothing. The reason she had not spoken was one she understood clearly and was not proud of. If Dorian learned the truth, she could not predict what he would do. He might take Ellis and leave. He might pursue the equity claim independently through lawyers in a way that triggered a public disclosure Serena could not control. He might simply look at her, this woman who had known for days and stayed silent, and decide she was exactly what the rest of the world was, someone who would choose the company over him. And he would not be entirely wrong, because underneath the guilt, underneath the genuine horror at what her father had done, there was a smaller and more shameful calculation running. If this became public without her managing it, Graham Voss and his faction on the board would use it to move against her. The stock would drop. The narrative would become, Halden Robotics built its empire on stolen work. Everything she had spent 5 years building would be reframed overnight. She was afraid. She was afraid of losing the company, and she was afraid of losing Dorian. And she was afraid that she had already become the kind of person who sat on a truth like this because it was inconvenient. She looked at the folder on her desk. She had to tell him. She knew that with complete certainty. She just had not yet found the courage to do it. Graham Voss had been on the Halden Robotics board for 11 years. He was the kind of man who arrived at every meeting 5 minutes early and spent those 5 minutes making sure everyone noticed. He wore his authority like a second suit, always pressed, always visible. He had supported Lionel Halden without question for a decade, and he had spent the 4 years since Lionel's death quietly, methodically building a coalition that could move against Serena if the right moment presented itself. He had been waiting for that moment. He found the archive trail on a Thursday afternoon, not the full picture, but enough. One of his people in the records department flagged an unusual access pattern on the legacy patent files. Graham pulled the access log, saw Serena's credentials, and made several calls before dinner. By Friday morning, he knew enough to be dangerous. He came to Serena's office without an appointment, which he had never done before. That alone told her everything about how much the balance had shifted. He sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and looked at her with the particular calm of someone who believes they are holding the better hand. "I know you've been in the old patent files," he said. Serena kept her expression neutral. "I review archived records regularly." "Not those records." He tilted his head slightly. "I think you found something that changes the picture considerably, and I think you've been sitting on it." He paused. "Which means we have a window, a short one." "A window for what, Graham?" "The Mercy Corps license deal," he said. "The military infrastructure contract. We've had the offer on the table for 8 months. It's the right move for the company, and you know it." He let that sit for a moment. "If we close it before any of this whatever you found becomes a conversation, the company is protected. The deal insulates us. No one looks at old patent filings when there's a 10-figure contract to celebrate." Serena said nothing. "If, on the other hand, you decide to open that particular door," Graham continued, "the story writes itself. Stolen credit, suppressed patents, a founding myth built on a lie. The stock drops 40% before the second news cycle, and then the board has a very serious conversation about leadership." He smiled in the way people smile when they are not actually smiling. "I'd rather not have that conversation. I suspect you feel the same." "Get out of my office," Serena said. He stood unhurried. "Think about it over the weekend. We vote on the licensing deal Monday." That Saturday, Serena drove to the east side of the city. She had not planned what she was going to say. She had told herself 3 times during the drive that she was not ready. But the folder was on the passenger seat, and Graham's deadline was 2 days away, and she was done waiting for a courage that was not going to arrive on its own. She found Dorian at the park 2 blocks from his apartment. Ellis was on the swings. He was sitting on a bench reading, though she noticed he was not actually turning pages. She sat down beside him. He looked at her, then at the folder in her hands. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, "about your wife." She watched his face change. She told him everything. The development files, the original contract, the patent restructuring. Her father's letters to Ariel's formal disputes, the notarized statement, the equity clause. She laid it out without softening it because he deserved the complete version, and she had already spent too much time trying to manage how things landed. When she finished, Dorian was quiet for a long time. Ellis was still swinging, calling out to her father to watch, and he raised a hand automatically without looking up. "How long have you known?" he asked. Serena did not look away. 9 days. The silence after that was different from the ones before it. It had weight. 9 days, he repeated. His voice was very controlled, which she recognized as something worse than anger. "I was afraid," she said. "I'm not defending it. I'm telling you the truth." "You were afraid of what it would cost you," he said, not a question. "Yes." He looked at Ellis. The little girl had jumped off the swing and was now attempting to climb the frame from the outside, which she was not supposed to do, and which Dorian would normally have stopped immediately. He didn't move. "She built the thing that saved people," he said quietly, "and they took her name off it." "Yes." "And my daughter is the rightful heir to the founding equity stake, yes." Serena paused. "I want to disclose it, publicly, before Monday's board vote. It will stop the Mercy Corps licensing deal, and it will cost me the CEO position if the board moves against me. But I want to do it." She looked at him. "I should have come to you 9 days ago. I'm sorry." He stood up. "Serena." He said her name for the first time, and it stopped her. "I need you to understand something. I don't care about the equity. I don't care about the board vote. What I care about is that you knew something about Ariel, about what was done to her, and you held it while you kept sitting at that cafeteria table and having dinner with my daughter." He called Ellis over and took her hand. "His badge still worked until Friday, but I need you to not contact me," he said. "For now." He walked away without looking back, and this time Serena did not call after him. Graham moved faster than Serena anticipated. By Sunday evening, a version of the story was already circulating in financial news circles. Not the real story, but Graham's version of it, carefully shaped and strategically released through 2 journalists he had cultivated for years. The headline that ran Monday morning read, "Halden Robotics Maintenance Workers' Hidden Agenda: How Dorian Price Infiltrated the Company's Inner Circle." The article was precise in the way that weaponized half-truths are precise. It acknowledged that Dorian had an engineering background. It noted that he had concealed this background when applying for a maintenance position. It described his recent proximity to Serena Halden, the cafeteria visits, the dinner, the after-hours conversations, and framed all of it as a long-game strategy by a man who had positioned himself to claim equity in a company he had entered through the back door. The phrase the article used was, "the million-dollar maintenance man." It was the kind of phrase that stuck. By Monday afternoon, there were 3 camera crews outside Ellis's school. Dorian found out from another parent who texted him at 2:15. He was already in his car, already driving. He got there before the bell rang and stood at the gate with his hands in his pockets and his jaw set and watched the cameras track him from across the street. Ellis came out holding a drawing she wanted to show him. She stopped when she saw his face. "Dad!" "Everything's fine," he said and took her hand. "Let's go home the back way today." She knew something was wrong. She was 7, not oblivious. On the walk home, she was quiet in a way she almost never was. And when they got inside, she sat at the kitchen table and said, "Marcus at school said his mom said you're in trouble." Dorian sat down across from her. "Some people are saying things about me that aren't true." "Why?" "Because the truth is more complicated than they want to deal with." Ellis considered this. "Is Serena involved?" He looked at his daughter. "Why would you ask that?" "Because she was the last new thing," Ellis said simply. He did not answer. He got up and started making dinner, and Ellis let him because she was her father's daughter, and she understood at 7 that some silences needed to be cooked through. That evening, Dorian called Serena. Not because he had forgiven her, because he needed to understand the shape of what was happening. She answered on the first ring. He told her about the cameras, about Ellis's question, about the article which he had read twice, and which had made him feel something cold and clarifying in his chest. "I know," Serena said. Graham released it. I should have moved faster.
You should have told me 9 days ago, he said.
Then none of this. He stopped. My daughter came home from school today and asked me if I was in trouble. She's 7 years old. There was silence on the line. I'm going to the board tomorrow, Serena said. I'm disclosing everything, the full truth publicly with documentation. That's your decision to make, Dorian said. It doesn't fix what's already out there about me. I know. I'm pulling Ellis from school for the rest of the week, and I've submitted my resignation from Halden Robotics effective Friday. He paused. I was going to look at apartments in another part of the city. Dorian. You held a truth about my wife, he said, while you were learning how I take my coffee and watching my daughter draw horses. I understand why you did it. I'm not sure that makes it better. He hung up. Serena sat in her apartment and did not sleep. She had lost the board. She had lost Dorian. She had managed through delay and fear and the habit of control to take a situation where she held the truth and turn it into one where she had nothing. The folder was on her coffee table. Inside it, Ariel's last letter, the personal one, not the legal correspondence, the one she had found tucked into the back of the sealed envelope, sat unread. Serena had been saving it. She wasn't sure for what. She opened it now. Act 3, Crisis. 643 words. Ariel Price had not written the letter for Serena. She had written it for Dorian in the months before she died during the last round of legal correspondence that had gone nowhere. It was dated 14 months before the accident. The handwriting was careful and unhurried, the kind of writing that meant someone had thought for a long time before picking up the pen. Serena read it slowly. Dorian. If you're reading this, then something happened and I wasn't able to tell you myself. I need you to know a few things. First, you didn't fail me. I know that will be the first place your mind goes. It always does. But none of what happened with the patent was something you could have prevented or fixed. I made the choice to fight it on my own because I didn't want it to touch you or your career. That was my decision. Don't carry it. Second, what I built works. Whatever they put on the paperwork, whatever name ends up on the filing, the algorithm is mine. I know what I made. It will keep working long after the argument about who made it stops mattering. That's enough for me. Third, and this is the important one, Ellis is going to need you to be present. Not successful, not ambitious. Present. I know you. I know how you process loss. You bury yourself in the work until the grief has somewhere to go. Please don't do that this time. She needs to see you standing still. I'm not afraid of what I built being forgotten. I'm only afraid of you forgetting that the best thing we ever made together wasn't an algorithm. Take care of our girl, Ariel. Serena read the letter twice. Then she set it down on the table and put her face in her hands. She stayed that way for a long time. When she looked up, the city outside her window was beginning to lighten at the edges. It was early. The board meeting was in 4 hours. She thought about her father, about the man she had spent her adult life trying to honor by keeping the company he built alive and growing and dominant. She had believed, without fully examining it, that protecting Halden Robotics was the same as protecting something worth protecting. That the scale of what the company did, the hospitals it served, the systems it ran, the lives it touched, justified the foundation it stood on. Ariel's letter made that argument impossible. It will keep working long after the argument about who made it stops mattering. Ariel had written that about her algorithm. But she had been wrong about one thing: it did still matter. It mattered because Dorian had spent 4 years believing his wife died without recognition, without justice, without anyone in the world acknowledging what she had given. It mattered because Ellis was going to grow up and eventually ask about her mother, and the answer she deserved was not a name missing from a patent filing. It mattered because a company that had been built on erasing someone did not get to keep calling itself a legacy. Serena stood up. She showered and dressed and made herself the only thing she knew how to make, black coffee, no sugar, and sat at her kitchen table with the folder open in front of her. She went through every document one final time in order, making sure she could speak to each one without notes. Then she called her attorney. Then she called the board secretary and confirmed her attendance at the morning meeting. Then she sat quietly for a few minutes and thought about Dorian standing at that school gate with his hands in his pockets, watching cameras track him across the street, and said nothing out loud. Just held it. She was ready. The boardroom was full when Serena walked in. Graham Voss was already seated third chair from the head, with the particular stillness of someone who believes the outcome has already been decided. Two of his coalition members sat on either side. The remaining board members arranged themselves in the careful neutrality of people waiting to see which way the wind was going before they leaned. Serena set the folder on the table and remained standing. "Before we move to the licensing vote," she said, "I need to present documentation that is material to everything on today's agenda." Graham's expression did not change. "We have a schedule, Serena." "We do," she agreed. "And what I'm about to put in front of this board will determine whether that schedule matters at all." She opened the folder. She walked them through it in order. The original Mercy Corps development files, the contractor agreement with Ariel Price, the internal correspondence showing the deliberate removal of Ariel's name from the patent filing, her father's letters to Ariel's legal challenges, the notarized statement Lionel Halden had signed in his final months, his acknowledgement his guilt, his attempt at correction. She read the equity clause aloud, twice. Then she placed Ariel's personal letter in the center of the table. She did not read it. She simply said, "This was written by the woman who built the technology this company was founded on. I think everyone in this room should know it exists." The silence in the room was the kind that comes after something has permanently changed. Graham was the first to speak. "This is a selective presentation of historical documents that have no bearing on—" "They have complete bearing," Serena said. "The founding equity stake that was contractually owed to Ariel Price was never transferred, never compensated, and never acknowledged. That stake belongs to her surviving family. I am formally notifying this board of that claim today on the record with full documentation." She looked around the table. "I am also withdrawing my support for the Mercy Corps licensing deal, permanently. We will not sell this technology to a military contractor. That decision is not open for a vote today or any other day while I hold this position." Graham leaned forward. "You don't have the votes to block it." "I don't need them," Serena said. "Because if this board moves forward with that sale, I will release every document in this folder to the press before the ink is dry on the contract. And then we will all find out together what a $4 billion company looks like when it's built on a lie." The door at the back of the room opened. Dorian had not been invited. Serena had sent him a single message that morning, not a request, not an explanation, just the time and the room number, and the words, "You should be here." She had not known if he would come. He was wearing his maintenance uniform. He had not had time to change or had chosen not to. He stood at the far end of the table and looked at the folder, and then at Serena with an expression she could not fully read. She turned to face him. She had prepared what she wanted to say. She had written it out at her kitchen table at 5 in the morning and then folded the paper and left it there because if she needed notes for this, then she was saying the wrong thing. "I asked you to marry me twice," she said. "The first time I told myself it was strategy. The second time I told myself it was protection. Both times I was using the closest true thing I had to say, which was that I didn't want to lose you, and I was wrapping it in a reason that made it easier for me to say out loud." She paused. "I'm not doing that now. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm telling you the truth about your wife in front of the people who buried it, because it's the only thing I can give you that actually belongs to you." Dorian was quiet. Around the table, no one moved. "Ariel built Mercy Corps," Serena said. "This company knows it now. It will be on the record. And Ellis will know it not when she's old enough to find it in a filing, but now in words from someone who looked her father in the eye and said it out loud." She stopped talking. Dorian looked at the folder on the table for a long moment. Then he looked at Graham Voss, who had gone very still. Then he looked back at Serena. "The equity," he said. "I don't want it structured as mine. Put it in a trust for Ellis. She decides what to do with it when she's an adult." Serena nodded. "And the foundation," he said. "Ariel's name goes on it, not as a tribute, as the founding attribution." "Yes," Serena said. He nodded once. Then he looked at Graham. "I think you were in the middle of losing a vote." Graham Voss left the meeting before the formal motion was called. 2 of his coalition members abstained. The licensing deal failed. The disclosure passed unanimously. Act 3 ending, 448 words. 3 months later, on a Thursday afternoon in early spring, Serena drove to the east side of the city without a driver. She parked in the same lot Dorian used in the far corner because that was where the spaces were. She walked the 2 blocks to Ellis's school carrying a small white box from the bakery near her apartment. Ellis had mentioned once in passing that she liked the ones with the yellow frosting, and she arrived at the gate 7 minutes before the bell. Dorian was already there. He looked at the box, then at her. "You remembered." "She mentioned it 4 weeks ago," Serena said. "I wrote it down." Something in his expression shifted, quiet, unhurried, the way things shift when they have been moving slowly for a long time and finally arrive. He had not made anything easy. After the board meeting, he had taken 2 weeks before he called her. When he did, he said only, "I'm not ready to trust you completely. I want you to know that I know the difference between what you did in that room and the 9 days before it." She had said she understood. He had said, "Good. Ellis wants to know if you'll come to her school thing on Thursday." She had said yes before he finished the sentence. That had been the beginning. Not a grand reconciliation. Not a morning where everything was resolved and the grief was gone and the complicated history between their families became simple. Just Thursday after Thursday, box lunches at the diner, a horse drawing taped to Serena's refrigerator, 12 legs this time, 2 hats considerably more ambitious. Evenings where Dorian cooked and Serena sat at the kitchen counter and learned slowly that being in a room without an agenda was not the same as wasting time. She had stepped back from the daily CEO role in February, transitioning to a strategic chairmanship. The Ariel Price Foundation had opened its first grant cycle the same week. She was still learning how to be still. The bell rang. Children poured through the doors in the chaotic, joyful way that Ellis always described as exploding out. Ellis spotted Serena first and ran directly to her, which still surprised Serena every time that a child could move toward her without hesitation, without calculation, without any reason except that she wanted to. "Is that the yellow frosting ones?" Ellis demanded. "It is," Serena said. Ellis took the box and immediately looked inside, and then looked up at Dorian with a satisfaction that was entirely her mother's. "She's good at remembering," Ellis announced. Dorian looked at Serena. "Yeah," he said. "She is." He reached over and took her hand. Ellis, already eating, did not notice, or pretended not to. Either way, she was smiling. Some people don't need to be rescued with money or a title. They just need the truth, a little respect, and someone brave enough to choose love over power. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, there are more stories like this one waiting for you, and we don't want you to miss a single one.